Kingdom family, kingdom family, kingdom family, what's up? I've missed you all so much. Here we are at the Kingdom, another session of the Kingdom that we get to be here and experience and enjoy together. If this is your first time here at the Kingdom, I want you to type in first time in the chat box and you'll see our entire community welcome you with open arms. If you've been coming and holding it down these last several weeks, I want you to just type in I've been here, so we know that you've been here holding it down here for the Kingdom family and community this whole time. I have a very special session today. I'm not back officially yet, so we're going to go back into playing the best of Kingdom episodes again next week. But I came in to do a very special session today because something special is happening this week that you all need to know about. So I made sure that I could come and do this brand new session for you all. And so if you're new to the Kingdom and if you're somebody who's never been here before, I just want to tell you our belief statements here, and this is what we rally around. We believe that all beliefs are welcome here. All biologies are welcome here. We believe in the power of music to open our hearts and minds, and we believe that wisdom can come from many places. Here at the Kingdom, we believe in an expanded definition of self, and here we don't just honor or tolerate each other's differences, but we know that we're stronger because of our differences, and when we learn to connect inside of those differences, and ultimately we rise together. And every single one of our sessions works pretty much the same way. We begin with a poem, music, some form of a song, and then we go into prayer. And I'll guide us through a prayer, and then you'll have about 60 seconds of silence to do your own personal prayer, followed by a teaching, a quick practice, a golden nugget, and an action for you to take into your life. You know, one of the things that I grew up in church as a kid, and although I don't call myself particularly, committed to one specific religion anymore, even though I'm very spiritual, one of the things that I always loved about church was I would leave feeling like so inspired. But one of the things that I didn't like about church is I didn't know how to put that inspiration into action in my life. And so here at the Kingdom, we're committed to bringing many religions and traditions and spiritual beliefs and practices and concepts together to teach these underlying concepts and principles, and then also see how you can bring those concepts and principles into your life in a practical and tangible way. So we'll get started in a moment. Before we do, I just have one quick announcement, okay? Well, really two easy announcements. One is that we opened up a few new rooms for our retreat in Bali. Many of you know, and I know some of you are new, so you don't know, that we are having a retreat in Bali March 13th to 20th of 2022, and we opened up some more rooms. We had completely sold out and had to take it offline. And so for those of you who are considering going, couldn't come before when we first announced it, you just go to justbebali.com, fill out the info, and you'll see the rooms that we still have available. And then finally, the what's next for the Kingdom. For those of you who are new here and haven't seen what's been going on, we went 60 weeks without me ever skipping a week. And right now I'm out in the world actually exploring a really big project that I'm working on that has me traveling quite a bit. And that project, I'm taking this time to step away from doing the live sessions of the Kingdom to really reimagine what does this community and the Kingdom look like in 2022 as the world changes and some stuff becomes in person, and we have some exciting things unfolding. But I just want you to know that what we're doing is we're taking the best of the best Kingdom episodes. We've had over 60 of them, and replaying them like reruns. And it doesn't matter because a lot of you who haven't been here from the beginning missed some incredible sessions. So we're pulling in some old ones, and starting next week, we'll do that again. And then I'll be back probably right around the holidays to be live with you all again as we usher in the new year and talk about our big New Year's event that we're going to do together, Manifest New Year's Eve. So those are our announcements, all right? It's now time to pray. So let us drop into our hearts. Just place one hand over the other. Take a full deep breath in and a deep breath out. And another breath in and out. That's right. And just soften in to your body. And here at the Kingdom, we for prayer, we like to put one hand over the center of our chest and the other hand on top of that, a little differently than the normal prayer hands we're used to, and just feel the connection into your own heart. Some people want it all, but I don't want nothing at all. If it ain't you, baby. If I ain't got you, baby. Some people want diamond rings. Some just want everything, but everything means nothing if I ain't got you, yeah. God, Spirit, universe, all that is, all that ever has been, and all that ever will be, may we remember to be committed to that devotional self, the self with a capital S, that exists beyond all problems and life forms. May we remember that even in times of hardship and struggle and conflict, that there is something greater at work, and that when we can commit not just to what's happening in this physical domain, but to what is actually happening internally and spiritually as we are evolving as humans on this planet, that we tap into a deeper knowing of something greater. May we each remember our power on this planet. May we each remember that we're here to do something great. And when we learn to take care of ourselves and others, when we commit to others and self, that we are able to change the world together. May each of us hear the exact message that we're meant to hear today. And may we all remember that we rise together. Thank you for our special guest who's coming in today. And may all the words that are spoken here be used for the benefit of all beings. This is your moment now to welcome in your own personal prayer. I'll be silent for about 60 seconds as you do that. God, Spirit, Universe, all that is, all that ever has been, and all that ever will be, we thank you. Thank you for bringing our community together for all these weeks. For those who've been holding down the fort and those who are here brand new, may they be welcomed here in this space of love and connection. So it is, and those who were listening to the recording and the podcast and beyond. So it is. Ashe, Aho, Salam, Amen, Shalom, Satnam, Awen, Om. Thank you. So here we are. Here we are, Kingdom family. So you might recognize that Alicia Keys song that I started with. And it's really interesting, right? When you look at that and you look at a lot of love songs that happen in, pop culture. And if you kind of replace the you from being like some hot person waiting in your bed to you, which is like the proverbial you, and also the you that is the you with the capital Y and the you that is the divine, there's these beautiful devotional songs that come out of them. Some people want it all, but I want nothing at all if it ain't you. The you that is calling us forward to our greater self and a greater world. And this, I think, will really tie into a lot of what we're talking today about. And I came back for this special session to talk to you about the power of radical self-care. Radical self-care. And I have with me somebody who many of you know, who is like, to me, one of the most important people in our world right now. I mean, literally has created massive amounts of change for millions, literal millions of people all around the world in the past 16 months throughout the pandemic. And she is Shelly Tegelski. And so Shelly Tegelski is an author, speaker, meditation teacher, and one of my favorite kind of titles of hers is a self-care activist. And many of you know that Shelly and I created the Liberation Experience together. We're writing a next book together, but we're not here to talk about next books yet because Shelly has a book that is coming out this week called Sit Down to Rise Up: How Radical Self-Care Can Change the World. You'll notice right there at the top that President Joe Biden endorsed her book, which is a big deal, as well as many celebrities and change makers all around the world. But it's not even about the celebrities or this or that. What this is about is how we can actually learn to care for ourselves and care for others in a way that takes us forward and evolves us towards our goals and a better world. And so I want to welcome here Shelly. Hold on, let me get you unmuted. There we go. What's up?
Hi.
Oh my God. I'm so grateful to have you here, Shelly. Thank you for taking the time to be here.
I'm so grateful to have you in my life every single day.
Yeah. And I mean, going on, I could go on and on and on and on about like all the professional things about why I love you, but just more importantly, just your heart, and your spirit and who you are and who you've been, not just in my life, but in the lives of so many people. And beyond just what you do, really who you are as a being is a gift to all of us. So thank you for being amazing and silly and magical and all of those things.
Oh my God.
I
You
love
know
you.
how good I am about taking
I know.
compliments,
I was like, I
so
know how much you love compliments, so let me go on here. Um, so here's the deal, Shelly. Your book is, and I'll say this to you all, okay? And I'm putting a link. We'll put a link in the chat box to Shelly's book here, so you all can pre-order it and get it. It comes out October 26th. Did I get that date right? Yes, October
yes,
26th.
October
Yep,
26th. That's right,
October
Tuesday.
26th. So just in a couple of days, and pre-order this book. I have to tell you all, first of all, pre-ordering a book helps first-time authors in ways that you may never imagine and expect. And I know some people hate Amazon with reason, right now, but pre-ordering this book on Amazon for a first-time author like Shelly, who actually really has a chance to be a New York Times bestseller, makes a difference in ways that we can't describe. Because for those of you who don't know, the way it works is all the pre-orders that come in, they all count like they're all happening on the first day and they all get tallied up. And so when that happens, it actually allows for the author to rise up in a big way on the charts, and their book and work gets to be seen by many more people. And so, what I want to share with you all right now is that Shelley's book, and I mean this with my whole heart, Shelley's book is incredible. Incredible. I have so many friends who've written books, and I've read a lot of my friends' books, and some of them are okay. I'll just leave it like that. Shelley's book is incredible. Okay? Incredible. And I want you all to know that when you read this book, it will change your life. So, Shelley.
Mm.
Your book, I think one of the things that I just want to like name right up front, right, is this sit down to rise up. And you talk about radical self care. Because we could break down this title in so many ways, why do you use those words in particular, radical self care?
Well, I think when you look at the term self care on its own, it's really been hijacked by the industrial wellness complex, right? By beauty brands and by people trying to sell you green juices and diet plans, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And the reality is that self-care really was born out of a need for survival. We relate it now to a point where self-care is for people who are maybe not in survival mode and they're in the mode of like, I need to thrive. I need to be the best version of myself, right? Or maybe we relate it to people who are the haves and can afford different types of what we deem to be self-care measures. And so the radical self-care is about a couple of things. First, it's about reclaiming the roots of self-care, which were born in the civil rights movement and born out of the women's liberation movement. Um, it means that we can use self-care as a means to um, self-preserve ourselves, right? Self-preservation, as a means for survival, as a means for community building. And it's certainly not a matter of self-indulgence. I think that a lot of people today think, oh, self-care, self-care. It's self-indulgence. It's selfish. And the reality is that if you really look to the roots of what self-care is, it's very deeply based in exactly the opposite of that. So
Which,
that's part one. And I think the second part is that it's about redefining what self-care actually means
right.
and redefining it beyond the self. That's really the premise of the book, right? The premise of the book is how do we move from the me, the inner journey of me, to the we, which is communal, to the us, which is movements. And there's like this through line that self-care actually is a really big part of. It's sort of the backbone of the ability to move from the self, from the inner work to the outer world, to how we show up in the outer world and the social justice work and the reform that we want to see in this world. And there's a really deep and meaningful connection. And so I want us to move beyond just the self and move into communal care and understand that self-care is not individualistic, it's actually a communal pursuit.
See, this is amazing. And I love this that like goes into the second half of your subtitle, which is how radical self-care can change the world. You know what I mean? And when we move into that us, and I also think in even redefining self-care and redefining self, when you look at caring for yourself and you think of the self, and many people here at the Kingdom have watched Dan Siegel and are familiar with Dan Siegel's work,
Mhm.
when with the we, when we look at the self as just me in this individual body, then when we're taking care of ourselves, we think it's selfish because it's just about me. But when you think of
Right,
yourself as a being that is connected to other beings, then any one part of that connection that is impaired or that is not well impacts the whole system. And so,
correct.
is that what you mean by self care changing the world?
Yeah, I mean that really, it's exactly that. It really does lean on, and you and I and Dan have talked about this, it's understanding that we are all interconnected.
Yeah.
We're all interconnected. One of your beautiful practices, Justin, that I know I like to give you a little rise. I kind of like, just because we have this sibling relationship, I like to jab you for. But I love your practice of, blessing the food that you eat before you eat it. And the reason I really actually do admire and appreciate that about you is because you take a moment to, look at this plate. And I imagine, and I don't even know, I've never even talked to you about this, so I don't even know if
Yeah,
this
I'm
is
like,
the
you've never said
actual.
this to me, so go ahead. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I've saved it all this time to tell you. But I love it because I think, I imagine in that moment, and when I watch you do it, it sort of reminds me as well to do this as well. That when you look at like the food on your plate, right? Let's say you're eating breakfast and you've got like eggs and potatoes and avocado on your plate, right? No nuts, because Justin's allergic to nuts. Everybody needs to know that.
Yeah.
So never send him anything with nuts. But if you look at your plate and you think to yourself, how many hands have touched this plate? Like, not like literally touch the plate, but actually, yes, the people who had to prepare the food, but also the people who had to, ship the food, and the people who had to pick the avocado from the tree, and then the person that had to plant the avocado tree and nurture it, and the person that had to purchase the land and to till the land to make sure the soil was right for the avocado tree. And then what about the plate that your food is on? Like, who had to create that plate? Was it made in a factory? Was it made by hand? Is it a disposable plate? And just, you start to think about that, and then you think about, how did those people even get to be on this planet, to be in that position to do that thing? Well, somebody had to give birth to them, and they were raised in a community, and they were raised in a family. And so my point is that we're all interconnected. Every single thing that we do, from crawling into our bed at night, and to reading this, this book, hopefully, you know, uh, the pages that are on it and the printer and the graphic design and everything that was on it is very much beyond just the scope of an inanimate object.
Yeah.
It's like so many hands touched it. And so when we think about that and we frame it as like ourselves, how many hands have touched us? How many people had the sort of inspired us and have just moved us and shaped us and like molding clay, right? Have contributed to who we have become as a person and will continue to contribute to who we are as a person. And look at all the people that we've contributed to, that we've helped shape their lives. So I think that we're definitely beyond just the self if we really take a moment to think about it. And we recognize that, therefore, if we really want to see the best version of the world in our lifetime, then we really have to start with the best version of ourselves. That we have to understand that there's this inherent connection. So the best version of the world starts with the best version of ourselves.
Yes. 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 In so many ways. And I love this, Shelley. I can go on and on about this forever. And I also think one of the other things that's really amazing about your book, okay, is the stories that you tell in this book are riveting. I mean, they're really, even knowing you for all this time, and having so many personal one on one moments, like reading the stories in this book, I'm like, what? What? I remember when I called you, I was like, I didn't know this happened, And there's a story that you open up with right in the very beginning of the book about you being kidnapped as a little girl. And this story has so much to it. So I'm wondering if you'd be willing. I know it's like a little spoiler for the beginning of the book, but
Yeah.
just tell like the briefest version of this story because I have so much around that I want to unpack around this story. So
Yeah.
you all are not going to
So,
believe
okay.
this story, okay? It's wild. Go ahead. Yeah.
So when I was 2 years old, my family was newly immigrated here to the U.S. from Jerusalem, which is where we immigrated from. And we moved to Brooklyn, New York, to Ocean Parkway, for those of you who are familiar with Brooklyn. And my mother had to go get a driver's license at the DMV. And my two older brothers were already in school. I was 2 years old, so too young to really, go to school. We couldn't afford preschool. My mom was still, couldn't even speak the language really. So definitely wasn't going to go out and seek employment at that time. And my dad was at work. I basically was kidnapped from the DMV right under my mother's nose. My mother was not being negligent.
She was getting
She
eye
was
exam, right?
was getting an eye exam, which she was really nervous about. Like, imagine having to study for an eye exam because you don't know the letters of the English alphabet. So you like are worried that they're going to not give you a driver's license because of that. So my mom was like really intently focusing on getting the eye exam, and I would venture to say that I probably wandered off because I was that type of kid that was kind of like, oh, let me go explore and see what's going on out there. So I probably like wandered off or meandered off, and I was picked up by a couple and they just walked out with me. And there was a woman sitting in the DMV waiting room that recognized me from the time that I was sitting in the waiting room with her and my mother and realized, wait a minute, that's not her, that's not who she came in with. There's something wrong here. And so in that moment, she had to make a very quick decision. And she had three choices to make, right? The first choice that she had to make, or the first choice available to her, was that she uh, could do nothing, which, by the way, is a choice. Every day that we choose to do nothing, it's an active choice. She could have ran to find my mother, which was a safer choice, right? And told my mother, hey, look, this thing just happened and you need to go run after your daughter. Or she could have just started running after or walking after these individuals, these perpetrators. And she decided to do the latter. She, in that moment, had the agency or the sense of agency to be a good Samaritan, rise up, show up for me, a perfect stranger, not knowing if her own life would be in danger, and how far it would go, right? Because these people didn't go into a car and like she would write down a driver's license number, or a driver's number, but she actually wound up following them for like several city blocks, and she saw them walking into a building, and then she ran back to the DMV. And by then, all hell had broken loose, of course. The police force was already there. The NYPD was there. My mother was crying. She doesn't speak any English. So she's like trying to explain in like charades that her little girl, you know, and pigtails and the whole 9 yards. And then this woman just comes in, sort of like through the police cars, grabs my mother's hand and says, "I know where your daughter is," and starts to pull my mother. And instinctively, my mother started to run with her, and the police followed. And they wound up back in the building, and they shut down the building, and they went through floor after floor after floor after floor. And I think on like the second to last floor, and it was a very tall New York City building, uh, they my mother was already losing all hope, and she was just hysterically crying, and the doors to the elevator opened, and I was there in this woman's arms, about to leave the building, perhaps, right? So in that very moment, my mother found me at the right time, and I jumped into my mother's arms, and I asked her, "Why are you crying?" And I had no idea that I was even in like, you know, harm's way. Like I actually wanted to introduce her, she said, to my new friend. You know, I was like, "Look, I found a new friend, you know, she's so wonderful." And I, you know, did regressive therapy to try to see if I was actually traumatized from this experience. You know, is there any trauma that's underlying that sort of affected me for the rest of my days that I'm not aware of? And there was literally no trauma whatsoever that I had experienced or that I could tap into. So for me, it wasn't a traumatic experience. Obviously, for my mother, it was a traumatic experience. And growing up, you know, this story was told again and again, over and over again at like dinner parties and, you know, to friends. And every time my mom would want to like create like a shock value type of a great story to tell somebody. And I heard it so many times. And most of the time, people's reaction when they hear the story is first and foremost like empathy for my mother, like, "Oh my God, that's the worst thing I could ever think of going through. Like, you know, I feel so bad for you. Like, how did you deal with it?" The second thing is people have empathy for me and like what I went through, even though I don't remember it. And you know, very rarely would somebody actually say, like, "Wow, you know, like this woman, what an amazing superhero. This woman just like appeared out of nowhere like an angel, you know, and made sure that you were out of harm's way. And the entire course of your life could have been completely different, right? It could have gone super sour. Like I could have, you know, lost my life or, you know, been raised by a whole different family. Like who even knows?" Um, and and I actually honed in my entire life on this story of this woman. I realized that this is not my story. This is a story of the Good Samaritan. And I oftentimes questioned whether I, if I was in the same position, would do the same thing. Would I have the courage and the bravery to stand up for what's right and to do the right thing, which is sometimes the most difficult thing to do. And I realized that I didn't believe that I would, and I wanted to change that. And so I wanted to make sure that I could tap into that Good Samaritan role and always show up. And it wasn't until I really, you know, started to delve into some deep work inside of myself, you know, with the help of guidance of teachers and community, that I realized that, you know, we could all cultivate that within ourselves.
Yeah, my gosh. Let's just take a breath with that story, everybody. Oh, you know? Yeah. So I think like when I first read the story, because that's how I got it in the book, you know, was when I first read your book. It's like the opening story of the book, and you all, the rest of the stories in the book, I mean, it's really just, they're all so good. And when I was reading that story, I remember my first thought was to you, "Oh my God, thank God Shelley got found." And then I did think about your mom. "Oh my gosh, her poor mom. Like, can you imagine this happening?" And I didn't until you drove the point home in the book of like, no, the real focus, the heroine of the story is this woman who got up and chased the people right away without saying anything. If she would have went and got your mom or told one of the employees what happened, game over. Do you know what I mean? How would
Yeah.
they have found you up in the top of this building, a few blocks away? They never would have found you there. I mean, unlikely. And so this Good Samaritan concept is a really big deal. I want to know, and you said this a little bit, but I want to know, how did that story, because I know you say this is not your story, you weren't traumatized by it because you didn't have an experience of trauma in the moment. How does that story impact you even today?
So I think about in moments where I see other people suffering or I see a grave injustice in the world, and I just harken back to and I sort of channel this woman, this Good Samaritan, and I say, okay, I need to like emulate that. I need to become her. I need to be her. I
Yeah.
am her, and I need to essentially, you know, just rise up and not think about myself in that moment, but think about, what am I going to do about this suffering? What am I going to do about this grave injustice? What am I going to do about this thing that is causing great fear or turmoil to me or to the world? And then, sort of I layer it on with a different question immediately, and that really came through my training in meditation, in metta, METTA. And that is, how do I come from a place of love? How do I always come from a place of love? So, just as a recap, the questions are, once you identify what you're feeling, right? Because you always, as Justin loves to teach and does so well, right? Like, name it to tame it. And so we name it to tame it, we label it, and that's the first part. We recognize what we're feeling, right? And then we pause for a minute. We have this moment of pause and we can say, okay, this is what I'm feeling. I'm going to accept it. I'm not going to judge myself for whatever it is that I'm feeling. But now I have an opportunity to take it a step further rather than being, sort of mired in these feelings of fear or anger or, any other type of emotion that I'm feeling or identifying at the time. Rather than getting mired in that and like going through this rabbit hole, right, where you're like sinking lower and lower and lower and feeling like, oh, I feel so hopeless, I can't do anything, I immediately default into, what can I do about it, and how do I come from a place of love?
What can I do about it, and how can I come from a place of love? I need everybody to type that into the chat box. What can I do about it, and how can I come from a place of love? This is really good because this shifts the actions that you would even choose to take. The questions that we end up asking ourselves shift the actions that we choose to take. This is a really good question, Shelley, about everything going on in our lives these days.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
so um there's another big theme in your book that is underlined in a lot of different places, but there's something that I've even heard you talk about often, which is, and it's something that I've never heard anybody else say, called kindsight.
Mm,
And this sight aspect and vision, and how we're seeing the world, how we see self-care, how we see
yeah,
ourselves, how we see. So
yeah,
I'd love for you to expand on kindsight a little bit, and what is it? Because it's really an
yeah.
amazing concept.
I'm going to read a quote from the book. Let me read this to you. So, kindsight, which is the title of chapter 6. And actually, I didn't invent this word. I need to give credit to Karen Salmonson, and she's a psychologist. And she says, view your life with kind sight. Stop beating yourself up about things from your past. Instead of slapping your forehead and asking, what was I thinking? Breathe and ask yourself the kinder question, what was I learning?
What page is that on?
That's page 95. I need my readers because I'm getting old and I can't see.
Yeah. Well, and you know what, Shelley? Can you read that last sentence again?
Sure. Instead of slapping your forehead and asking, what was I thinking? Breathe and ask yourself the kinder question, what was I learning?
That is fucking huge. What was I learning?
Yeah.
And is this so
Yeah.
this kind sight? Is that what it is?
Yeah. So that is a quote that I read from Karen Samuelson like years ago. And it stuck with me. It was like one of, I love quotes. I like, keep them kind of like in my notes on my phone.
Yeah, you're a quote queen.
And I am. But I extrapolate from them, right? So I find a quote that I like, and then I like delve deeper into like, okay, what is the meaning of this quote and how does it relate to my life, like right now in this moment? And so the entire chapter was really, here, this is chapter 6 in the book, which is the completion of the first section. The book is written in 3 sections: the me section, part 2 is the we section, and part 3 is the us section, right? And so this is the preceding chapter to moving into the we, into community. And it's really about sort of reflecting back on this period when I sort of was able to pivot beyond myself, beyond my like woe is me mentality, and move into wisdom is me, right? So that's my quote. Like, instead of saying woe is me, we got to say wisdom is me. Wisdom is me. And I learned so much about myself, through divorce and through being a single mother and through health issues and just mistake upon mistake upon mistake. And rather than getting down on myself and being like, God, I'm such a screw up, my life is just taking all these wrong turns, and I could have really just thrown my hands in the air at that moment. And I look back at myself now and I think, God, where did I pull in that strength from to just not give up?
Yeah.
Because I actually think that in this moment, um, as I read through my own story, because I had to like read it for my audiobook, I thought, oh my God, I don't even know if I could at this age go through that right now. I think I'd just be like, oh, hell no, I'm out,
Yeah.
forget it. Like,
I know. I
done,
think of that. I think of that
right?
too,
Throw
Shelly.
the towel in.
When people read my bio or when I tell the story of like growing up in a home with like gunshot holes on the outside, I was like, if somebody shot a gun in here right now, I would be like so like not okay. And like that happened all the time when I was a kid. You know what I mean? So anyway, it's just crazy.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah, and it was like
Yeah.
not a thing. You're like,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. I think it's really a matter of just yeah, I think we wind up, and I think this harkens back to a lot of what you and I talk about and we teach together, which is about conditioning.
Yeah.
And I think that as time goes by, like, we kind of layer on additional lenses that we see the world through, and we have more labels that are assigned to us, et cetera, et cetera. And when we're younger, we have some, of course, that we're born into. But I think part of life is sort of like you're born without these labels, or without the recognition that you have them, and then you sort of accumulate them over time, and then you get to this pivot point in life where you're like, wait a minute, I am not those
I
labels,
don't need those things.
and you start to shed those layers, right? And it's similar to sort of where I got to with this nomadic life that I'm living, similar to you at this point, where I felt like I spent half of my life like accumulating stuff. And now I'm spending the second half of my life just giving stuff away and getting rid of stuff. It's like a shedding.
This is amazing. The concept of sight, really takes itself through a lot of your story, and I love this idea of kind sight and looking at our story from a kinder perspective and asking what it is that we were learning instead of being so hard on ourselves. But I also know that there's something that surprises people when they find out that you also have a condition that has something going on with your vision, and your eye.
Hmm.
Would you mind talking to us about that?
Yeah. So, first of all, I want to say that I have nothing wrong with my vision. I have something wrong with my eyesight.
Thank you.
Eyesight and vision are very different things.
Yes.
And I also learned the hard way. And I actually feel like I've gotten more vision, even though my eyesight has gone down the tubes. Um, so I was diagnosed when I was 27 or 26, turning 27. My son was 2 years old, barely 2 years old, with a condition, an autoimmune condition called uveitis. And the type of uveitis that I have is called pars planitis, which is an autoimmune condition of the eye. And in about 80% of people, it also is sort of like a byproduct of another autoimmune disease. So multiple sclerosis or ankylosing spondylitis or even, HIV or AIDS. And it starts to attack your eyes. Your brain tells your eyes that there's an infection there that isn't there. And then, of course, when there's an infection in your body, what happens? Your brain says, oh, okay, cue the white blood cells. Let's send them into your eye. And so I wind up with a ton of white blood cells in my eyes. I'm 27, and I wake up one morning and I am blind in both eyes. I cannot see a thing. And I would describe it as a whiteout. Imagine like when you're in a plane and you suddenly go through a cloud and like you can't see anything, so that you can't blink it away. Like that's essentially what I was seeing. And it was scary. It was so frightening because I didn't know what I had. I went to sleep the night before and I could see just fine. And I also didn't know if I would get my sight back.
Yeah.
So I wound up, going through to many doctor's appointments, to many specialists, having many tests done, trial and error, found out that I have uveitis. And I was told by my ophthalmologist at a very good eye hospital that I really had this distinct possibility of being blind before the age of 40. And so when somebody tells you something like that, right? Like when somebody tells you that you have 10 years to live, or that you are going to be blind in like 15 years, or that, just something has a timeline, right? Which, by the way, which is very silly because life has a timeline.
Yeah.
But we think we're guaranteed forever, that we're guaranteed tomorrow. But I think when somebody actually tells you like this is your timeline, you start to live life very differently. You start to see things very differently, no pun intended. And you start to realize that all of the things that you were sort of putting off to tomorrow, and all the things that you find as being important, or you assigned a certain level of importance to, are suddenly you're questioning that. You're like, is that really important? And should I be putting this off until tomorrow? And so for me, it was like really also the fear. Initially, I dropped into fear, of course, and anxiety about like, will I be able to see my son again? Like his face? Will I be able to, read a book? Will I be just basic things we take for granted? I think we really do. Until we lose our senses, we really take them for granted. Whether it's our hearing, whether it's our eyesight,
Yeah.
anything. And so, and a lot of people I know who had COVID, right, lost their taste and their smell, which, and they were like, this is so weird. It's so bizarre. But it's like these two senses that we don't really ever think of until we don't have them. And then we're like, God, it's so weird to function without. You're eating something and you can only have the texture, but you can't actually taste what it tastes like, right? So yeah, so essentially, I wound up really again using that as a point of hindsight, as a point of like just an aha moment, a pivot point for myself to realize that I am not guaranteed anything, and that because of that, I have to show up every single day as the best version of myself that I could be in that moment, right? Knowing that I'm going to accumulate tools over time, knowing that I'm not perfect, knowing that I make mistakes, knowing that I might hurt people along the way, and have to certainly apologize, but really trying to just every single day improve myself as a person.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this is so powerful, Shelley. And just for the record now, you were 27 when this happened, and now you're how old? And your son is?
I'm 44 and my son is 19,
Yes.
and I can
Awesome.
still see out my right eye. My left eye actually am vision impaired. And so, and that happened a couple of years ago. And it was strange because I think people felt worse for me than I felt for myself. Everybody was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry that this happened. And I was like, I know I should feel worse than I do, but I have been like prepared for this. Like I've literally been preparing for this moment. And it's going to take me a while to recalibrate and to be able to like do the things that I like to do, right? Because my equilibrium, once you kind of lose whether it's hearing or your eyesight or something like that, you wind up having to recalibrate like your balance, or like for a while I was afraid to drive a car because like I was like worried that I would like clip somebody on my left side. But now all I want to tell everybody is stay off the roads when I'm in your town. Because I'm driving a car, and I figure, I'm originally, I lived in Florida for many years, and so I figured if like these 85-year-olds in Florida are driving these giant Cadillacs, and all you could see is like the top of their heads and their hands on the steering wheel like this, then I'm certainly okay to drive
You're
too.
certainly okay to drive, and you're driving us forward in a really big way towards change, Shelley, and transformation and kindness and love. And I'm so grateful for that. As we come to a close here at the Kingdom, we do something pretty much in every single session, which is a practice, and we also do an action. And I wanted to combine the two here because I think you have something that's really so incredible that I just want to give people kind of the tip of the iceberg here so they have a practical takeaway. But in your book, you guide us through the importance of creating what's called a self-care plan. And
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could, even if people, if you're watching live right now, you can pull out a piece of paper. If you're watching the recording paper, you can type it in the chat box or on your computer. If you're listening to the podcast, whatever, you can put it in the notes on your phone. But if you could just guide us through a little bit of an experience, and I know there's many versions of this, of how we can even
Yeah.
start to create a self-care plan in our lives and why that's important.
Well, so I think that in our minds, we know what self-care practices work for us, right? Whether it's meditation, whether it's yoga, whether it's just going for a walk, whether it's sitting down with a cup of tea or in silence or with a friend and having a conversation. And there's on and on. I mean, you could go on and on in terms of like how we can replenish ourselves. But what happens is that oftentimes when our amygdalas get hijacked, when we're in the moment of like, oh my God, my like top just flipped off and like I just don't know what to do, you are like panicking, you're in this mode of like, again, that fight flight freeze which we've been conditioned to, and you're like, I don't know what to do, I'm feeling so overwhelmed, and then we make bad decisions, right? We turn to like low hanging fruit of like, I'm going to just eat more, or I'm going to drink, or I'm just going to sit around and just completely like, do nothing. And it's exactly the opposite of what it is that we should be doing. And so having a formalized self-care plan is, the way I view it, is like having that fire extinguisher in the glass box, and it says like, in case of emergency, break glass, right? And so formalizing the plan basically just means that you are going to, number one, write down the plan, and you can literally Google self-care plan templates, and there are hundreds of templates to choose from. So if you're a visual person, there are hundreds of different kind of visual exercises and charts and graphs, etc. You can use different colors. If you're a list person that likes Excel spreadsheets, there's versions for you, and on and on. And so that's number one. So create a self-care plan. And the second thing is that we create the self-care plan. Once we actually create a formalized version of it, we have to share it with somebody, at least one other person, in a formalized way. Because creating it and just sticking it in our junk drawer in the kitchen, or like, under a stack of books or the mail that's come in, is like futile. Because again, when you need it the most, you're not going to be looking at it, right? So you share it with somebody, there's a level of accountability. You become more, you're held accountable, and you also are able to then identify the things that are obstacles. What are the obstacles that are going to be preventing you from actually enacting these self-care items that are on your list? And so what I could tell you is that when I sat down to actually create a self-care plan for myself, and I wound up sharing it with other people after failing to enact it myself at the time that I was a single mother. I shared it with a bunch of girlfriends, and I said, look, I'm miserably failing. I have all these health issues. I'm a single mom. I'm working full time. Like, there's just not enough time in a day. Like, I'm suffering from time poverty in a very massive way. and I don't know what to do because I'll never get better if I completely continue in this cycle, you know. And once I shared that plan with people and said that these are the things that I really want to try to do on a weekly basis for myself, my self-care community, as I call them, right, my community of care, my safety net, was able to just come around and say, okay, let's go through each thing and identify the actual obstacles or the barriers that are preventing you from doing that. If is it money, is it training, is it time, what is it? And you know, just a simple example that people may be able to relate to, like I couldn't get a workout in or like actually be physically fit enough or find the time to do anything for myself because the morning routine, again, as a single mom trying to get my son dressed and fed and get my lunch made and get out the door in time to get him to school to then drive to work at the time, right, which was like a 45-minute drive for me from his drop off point, was like impossible. I was like, there's no way I can wake up any earlier. Like then I'd be waking up at 4 in the morning. Like, and that's also then I'm sleep deprived, right? So my girlfriends actually came together and they said, okay, well, we're going to create a carpool. And even though it's out of our way, we're going to drive Liam to school on Mondays and Wednesdays. And would that, you know, be helpful for you? And of course it was. You know, suddenly I was able to just wake up, stay in my pajamas, get him ready for school, be more present for that experience with him in the morning, put him in one of their cars, and then suddenly I had like literally an hour and change to just focus on myself and take it slow and like meditate without like interruption and, you know, go for a walk and just, you know, spend time doing what I needed to do to replenish my soul. And you know, that wouldn't have happened if I didn't share the plan. And what happened was once I did that and I shared my plan and they were able to sort of like help me with different things on the list or hold me accountable by just simply sending me a text message or calling me and saying, how was your meditation today? I didn't really do it, you know, and I, like many people I'm sure that are on this call, have a much easier time disappointing myself than I do disappointing other people. So I never wanted to disappoint my friends. So of course I always stayed on the ball just so that I could be like, oh, it was great. I did this, you know? Um, and so, you know, it's like that gave them the courage to also then create their own plans and to share their plans because they had different obstacles. And so we wound up creating this really beautiful community that was really centered around, you know, a community of mutual aid, a community where every single person had something that they could offer and every single person had things that they needed, and we were all able to like be the puzzle pieces that kind of completed the puzzles for each other. And it was beautiful because it also removed one of the most difficult aspects of life, I think, which is asking for help. Because when you're in these types of safety nets and communities of care, you don't have to ask for help
Yeah.
because you're constantly sharing your self-help, you know, your self-care, excuse me, you know, list, and you're also constantly sharing your obstacles, and somebody will invariably always say to you, well, I can help with that obstacle.
This is beautiful. And I just want to, this is amazing. And it's so, this is what I love about your work and your book. Sit Down to Rise Up, everybody. How radical self care can change the world. Shelly's holding it up. Yes. The only reason I'm not holding it up is because when I was with her in New York, I didn't grab my book. And so I'm getting mine just like all of you this week on the 26th. And, you know, just to recap, and I want you all to type this into the chat box. Number one is creating the plan. What are the things that you need that help you stay well and that help you take care of yourself? And number two is who can you share it with that will hold you accountable and be checking in with you and holding that space? And one of the things that I love that I hear Shelly sharing all the time is like, it doesn't have to be just the closest people to you. You can reach out in your network a little bit beyond, just like
Yeah.
you had other moms that were at the school that your son went to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then really
Yeah.
identifying what are the obstacles that might keep you from reaching some of your self-care goals, and then looking at who you can reach out to that might be able to fill in some of those obstacles. And that leads us to the vulnerable point, which is asking for help, which is a really big
Mm-hmm.
deal for so many of us. But I guarantee you all, if you do that, you will make a big impact in your life. So I want you all to just type in and or write down, what are some of the things that you do to take care of yourself? Who are some people you can share this plan with? And what are some of the obstacles that might stand in your way? I'd love to hear this so that we as a community can be here with each other and actually help connect and remove some of those obstacles for one another. Shelley,
Beautiful.
I want to thank you so much for taking the time. You are on a whirlwind right now and so busy. Shelley was on national TV just the other day on the Tamron Hall show and has been doing all these crazy, amazing things. And so I'm really grateful that you spent the time to come to our little community. I'm kidding. Our amazing community. And
Amazing.
yeah, and I'm wondering, we close out every single one of our sessions with a prayer. Before I do that,
Yeah.
I want to just put the slide back up. Sit Down to Rise Up, Shelley's book, How Radical Self-Care Can Change the World. Somebody dropped the link in the chat box for me again, from the one that we have put in there already. And everybody go pre-order Shelley's book. That comes out October 26th on Tuesday, depending on when you're listening to this. And Shelley, I would be so grateful if you would close us out, our community, with a prayer.
Yeah, I would love to. And I actually will read a prayer that is from the Old Testament, from the Talmud, which is the oral Torah, the oral Testament. And it's the last quote that's in my book. Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now. Love mercy now. Walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. Onward.
Onward. Onward. Thank you so much, Shelley, for being.
Thank you. I love you. I love you so much. You are my soul brother, and I'm so happy that you're in my life. And I'm so happy that by virtue of that, the extension of you, this community, is in my orbit. And I really look forward to hearing from all of you about your self-care plans and how it's going, and hope to hear your feedback about my book as well. Thank you.
Shelley, thank you so, so much. And everybody, Shelley, Sit Down to Rise Up. Her book, again, How Radical Self-Care Can Change the World. Please take some time to go get this book. It will change the trajectory of your life. I promise you. I want to thank you, Kingdom family, for coming here. It feels so good to have a new session that we get to dive into together. I love you. I thank you. I honor you. Thank you for holding this community down as we plan for our next steps. And remember, the most important thing, we rise together. I love you. Bye for now, everybody.